Hi, Meg. I'm so excited to have you here and welcome to the Screw Being Unhappy podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So, Meg, you have been where some women and men are right now. You were stuck in the endless cycle of dieting and binging, and you have tried a number of things. And after many attempts at recovery and therapy, you discovered that your own journey was slightly different than expected. So, can you tell us a bit more about your story?
Yeah, my story is pretty long. When I was very young, when I was 11 years old, I was actually diagnosed with an eating disorder. It was quite serious. And I did seek treatment and recovery for that. And throughout my later teens to 20s, I was in what I call a state of quasi recovery. So I was weight restored and I was functioning and I had a job and everything was okay. But I still had these incessant thoughts. I was always worried about what I was eating. I was always thinking about how many calories I was having. I was always really unhappy with my body. And I just felt like I still needed to lose weight. And so I tried diets and workout programs and meal plans and everything to sort of get the body that I wanted. And I could never stick to the diet. So I always ended up, sneaking in the kitchen to grab a bag of chips, and one bag turned into two, turned into eating everything in the cupboard. And I went back and forth because I felt so guilty. I was like, I've got to try harder tomorrow. I've got to start the diet again tomorrow. I've got to try something new tomorrow. And that went on for a few years actually. Um, and I remember one day I was doing a workout and I was so tired and I just collapsed. And I was like, I'm so hungry, but it's not time to eat yet. So I'm not allowed to eat, but I'm so hungry, but I'm not allowed to eat. And I was just going back and forth in my head. And I was like, no, this can't be right. Like, I just want to eat normally. There's got to be a way to like just be normal. This is insane. And I was actually really lucky that I was approached by someone who was like, hey, I'm actually doing this program. I think it could help you. And she took me through what is intuitive eating, which I had never heard of before. And it was the most amazing thing I've ever done. And I think it's kind of funny because really what it is kind of just getting back to our intuition, what's really inside of us. And it was just so interesting that I had spent literally years trying to listen to all the outside messages and the diets and the programs and the this and the that. And it took someone else being like, no, 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 you just got to listen to yourself. And it was the best thing that ever happened.
Yeah, sometimes like we just have to discover the things ourselves. And I think it's like beautiful that you are sharing this story because as we say, and as a coach, like often like I talk about things with my clients and we discuss things which look obvious, but for them it's like a huge aha moment. So saying it's kind of obvious, like it always is, but we have to find our own way. And you hinted on my next question, actually, because I just wanted to clarify the terms and kind of get the more clarity about what we are chatting about. Like, is emotional eating an eating disorder, or like what are the differences? Like for the people who are listening, maybe don't know where the lines are. Like, what is emotional eating? What is an eating disorder?
I think it's really difficult to define. When I got sick when I was 11 years old, there are two eating disorders. There's anorexia and there's bulimia. Anything outside of that it's just outside of that. And over the years, I think the medical world has begun to expand and understand that there's so many different ways that eating disorders can manifest in people. And there's also ways that disordered eating can manifest in people. And so I don't think it's necessarily up to me to make a hard definition of this is an eating disorder and this isn't. But what I do want to say is that when you're unhappy with the way that you eat, when you're feeling like obsessed or worried or anything about food, or feel like you're not enjoying your life or your food, and just have that thought of like, I wish I could just eat normally, you deserve to. you deserve to seek help and treatment to find that. And it doesn't matter if a doctor says you have an eating disorder or not. You deserve to seek treatment. When it comes to what is emotional eating, I would think for myself and a lot of people that I work with, emotional eating means that you are responding to emotions with food. And most of the time that can be intense negative emotions, whether we experience those intense negative emotions and we turn to food for comfort or distraction or numbing. But we can also use food as the response to intense positive emotions. It can also be a way that we celebrate, or ways that we feel uncomfortable with intense positive emotions and use food to kind of like numb us out and bring us down. So I think that for the most part, emotional eating really just means that you're responding to what's inside with food.
Yeah. And I love that you said like it doesn't matter if officially somebody is dealing with emotional eating or having a disorder, but as far as you are unhappy, you deserve, and I want to highlight this word, deserve, to seek help, because I'm just watching one course about creating habits because it's the topic I love. And the professor, he said, you don't get extra points if you deal with it alone. The goal is to solve the problem. You don't get extra points for doing it alone. Yet so many people feel like if I do it alone, it's somehow better.
I love that.
Yeah. So as I was telling you in a chat, like that my relationship with food was complicated for many, many years. And I would say I had quite serious issue, but I never told anybody. And I always thought I have to deal with it alone because so much shame was associated with it. As I said, like I usually don't talk about it. Like only my husband and my ex-husband know about this, nobody else. So that's why I'm not going to go into detail, but like I felt like I really have to deal with it alone. And I did eventually. But probably if I would get help, I could solve it much faster. And I really believe this as a coach. And
Yeah.
the second point I wanted to react, that you hinted on, like the emotional eating can be like to calm ourselves down and kind of to deal with the negative emotions. But what I love, and which I think usually that's not talked about, is also that it can be enhancing the positive emotions. Because I mean, in how many cultures like joy and celebration is associated with food?
I agree. And I think that some people they think that using food to celebrate and having joy around food is emotional eating. And I don't think it's exactly the same. I think that emotions can be associated with food, and that doesn't necessarily mean emotional eating. I think that it's when you're trying to respond to emotions that already exist with food is where the emotional eating comes in. But I think that having an emotional response to food is so beautiful and so important and a part of life.
Yeah, I mean, if we would look at it that way, as you said, some people look at it as emotional eating, then I think like whole nation of Italy would be classified as having problems with emotional eating, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I really like that distinction. And recently I talked to my friend, he's a journalist, and he does lots of research about mental illnesses. And we were talking about something similar with alcohol, like how culture really determines it. And alcohol is often also part of the celebration. And it's a drug which has, according to the research, one of the worst impacts, yet is kind of culturally normative, and it's okay like to have a drink at the celebration, and we kind of show it to our children. So I think this is like really important, like also to take consideration when we are talking about it. And then I had like, actually it's connected, and I think maybe you kind of answered it already, but maybe you still have something to say. What I wanted, it was one of the later questions about like, how do I know like that I just overeat sometimes, or that I actually have a problem? So I think you kind of answered it, but maybe something else comes to your mind.
I think that I think it's honestly it's normal to overeat sometimes. I overeat sometimes when I'm going out or if I have like a really, really delicious meal. Sometimes I go past being full and I overeat. And I think that what's different when I experience it now, for example, than when I was constantly binging is I think it's the thoughts and the emotions that are tied to it and the why and the frequency. So, now if I overeat, like I said, it's maybe it's a celebratory meal and I'm having a bit more, or I'm going out, or it's extra tasty, and it doesn't happen very often. And when it does happen, I'm just so grateful to be having this amazing food. And yeah, I ate a little bit too much, but it's okay. And I move on. And the next day and the next week and the next month or my normal eating schedule versus when I was stuck in this pattern, there was a lot of shame and there was a lot of guilt and there was a lot of unhappiness and a lot of discomfort, and I overate a lot, almost daily. And I think that that was kind of the difference between really having a problem with it and kind of just overeating every once in a while like is normal.
Yeah, no, this really talks to my heart, and I feel like what you just described, that's how I feel about it. And yesterday I was recording podcast. I was about to cry. Now I feel like I got also like I will start crying again because the way you said like it's normal to overeat. Like I don't think I ever thought about it that way. Even now when I overeat sometimes, like it doesn't bring me really negative emotions. And as you said, the next day I am in like my normal eating, but I never just got that sentence like in my head that it's normal to overeat. And that's amazing. I'm blown away right now.
Yeah, it's so different when you just kind of like recognize what feels normal and what feels good, and there's no negative emotions or thoughts connected to the way that you eat.
Yeah.
You just eat. And
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah, a part of like trips to Italy, this also brings to my mind like my trip to Thailand. And I was telling everybody that when I was in Thailand, I had to wake up very early so I could manage like at least 5 meals a day because the food is so good. And I never
Yes.
had any like negative emotions about it. And I would do it
Nope.
again because the food is so amazing, right?
Yeah. And
And
that's part of it, when you're traveling and you're experiencing, like those are those moments where like, I wouldn't call that emotional eating. I would call that experiencing joy and culture and just so many things around food that are so beautiful.
and like it's amazing like when you travel and just to approach like the people from the country, like eating with them. That's why I love the street food, and especially in Africa I'm always the one eating the food from the streets, because it's like a way to connect with people.
100%. And like I remember traveling while I was still struggling with this and not eating street food and counting my steps all day and not getting what I wanted off the menu because it might have too many calories. And I think back now and I'm like, oh my goodness, that was like a big part of the trip and the culture that I missed out on because I was so worried about food and my body. And that was one of the main things that I got so excited for in my recovery was like, wow, I get to experience these things now and I get to enjoy them and not be worried.
Mm. So as you just mentioned the recovery, and before you mentioned that like what changed everything was that somebody introduced you to the intuitive eating. So I kind of wanted to find out like why was it so hard for you to stop dieting and binging before this course, this approach came to your way, and like what made it so different? What made it game changer for you?
I think you'll also really resonate with this as a coach. I felt like when I was stuck in that cycle, the binging and restricting and dieting and just over and over, I felt like I know what to do. I know what to do. I just don't know how to do it. I don't know how to get there. I don't know how to like make that connection, that step. I know I have to eat normally and eat well. I know I have to stop dieting. I know I have to like deal with my emotions. How? I don't know how. And I felt like it was that like I don't know what step to take or where to go or where to look that just kept me in the cycle because I just felt kind of lost. Again, I had never heard of what intuitive eating was, but when I was introduced to it, I was like, oh, this is the how. This is how you nurture or you nourish yourself properly. This is how you understand when you're hungry and when you're full. This is how you deal with those intense cravings that you feel like you can't ignore. This is how you cope with those negative emotions that make you want to turn to sugar and fat and just numb out. Like, this is the how. And I feel like that was what was different is I always knew what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to do it.
Okay. And for the guys who are listening and maybe they never heard about intuitive eating, can you just summarize quickly, like, what does it include? What is it? We can make
Yeah,
assumptions, but it's
absolutely.
good to hear like more in detail.
Sure. And I think it's good because I think intuitive eating is getting more popular and people don't quite know what it is. So when I speak to people and I say, what is intuitive eating? They're like, oh, it's just eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, make sure you eat all your cravings, and like that's it. And I was like, oh, that's a very, very small part of intuitive eating. Because for me, when I was struggling, if someone had said, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, eat whatever you want, I would have been like, well, that's pizza all the time, 24/7. I just would never stop eating pizza. That doesn't make sense. There's so many other principles. There's, understanding gentle movement, gentle nutrition, thinking traps. There's taking food off the pedestal. There's so many other parts of intuitive eating, 7 principles actually. And the basis of it is getting back in touch with our intuition. So if you think of like a baby or a toddler, when they're hungry, they'll cry or they'll ask for food. And when they're full, they'll stop. They'll move their head, I don't want any more food, or they'll stop eating because they know what their bodies want, they know how much they want, and then they're done. And then they might come back to food a bit later, or they might ask for a snack, but they're so in touch with their gut and their intuition. And that's what intuitive eating brings us back to. It's no longer listening to those outside messages. It's understanding, what do we need to feed ourselves to feel good.
Yeah, as before you mentioned the toddlers, that's what I was thinking about, because I have a son, he's 3.5, and like it's kind of, they have it in themselves, like they kind of know where they want to eat, how much, what. Yet we adults, like we try to change it for them, which actually doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, right? Like it's like, why we should do that, why we should be changing it for them, because they already know and they are probably doing better job at their nutrition than we.
Yeah. And it's so beautiful to like watch that happen and recognize that we can actually do that ourselves. And if we listen to that, we will not eat pizza all the time. We will not only crave junk food. We will not never stop eating. Once we can actually listen to that, we can trust that their bodies are pretty smart. They know
Yeah,
what they're doing.
it feels like you're reading my mind, because the second thing I wanted to say, like I had years issues like with food, like the way I dealt with chocolate, it was like I couldn't buy it because otherwise I would just finish it. So I was not buying it, but then when I would like get a gift or something, like it would be gone. And what I was about to say, that actually like now I eat sweet stuff, but not that much, because like I think after we like again like start to listen to our bodies, we realize like we don't want these things.
Yeah. Oh my
Like,
gosh, yes.
yeah, and it's the same with coffee. Like I stopped drinking coffee, I don't know, 2 months ago. And at that time, I couldn't imagine like living without coffee. And now when I have the decaf or I have coffee from time to time, very little, I don't actually enjoy it. It feels like it's like, like
Yeah.
that feeling in the body that it's not good for your body. And I feel it. But
Yes.
before, it was the best part of my day, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is about so many other things too. Like I've heard people say like, "Oh, I can't really eat intuitively because like I'm lactose intolerant and so I can't eat all these foods." And it's not about like I can't, it's about if I eat this, how do I feel? How does my
Mm.
body feel? Not good. I feel sick and I have indigestion, and that's your body's way of saying, oh, that one didn't sit well with me. I didn't really like that. And so instead of saying, I can't have this or I'm not allowed to have this, it's what makes me feel good. What makes me feel alive and energized and happy. And that's how we can look at our food.
And correct me if I'm wrong, and you mentioned the 7 pillars, so I'm sure like the mindset kind of will be part of it, but also like when we realize like what we want to do, and we bring like more consciousness in our day. And if we just take like few seconds, like to actually think, if I am grabbing the bag of the potato crisps or the chocolate, like if we bring more like presence in the moment, like I think that has also impact. So maybe you can talk about that a bit more, about like the kind of connection of eating to our mind and our mental health.
Absolutely. I think mindfulness is a huge part of intuitive eating. It's one of the first things I work on with my clients. Is just kind of just that. Like every time you eat, kind of just take a minute. Am I being aware? Am I being mindful? Am I being distracted? Am I, how am I when I'm eating? Where is my mind at when I'm eating? And building that mindfulness and awareness, it's kind of like about connecting the mind and the heart and the gut and making all three connected. So you're not just eating with your heart and your emotions. You're not just eating with your mind and like I'm supposed to have X, Y, and Z, but you're kind of connecting all three, and you're being very mindful of what I need and what I don't need. And the more connected you are with all three brains, essentially, and more mindful you are, the more you're able to, be at peace with not boredom eating. And you don't feel like I need to just grab something from the cupboard because I need something to do with my hands, or I'm bored, or it's just what I do. And you build so much more self-awareness that way. And I think that through that, you also enjoy your food so much more. And through enjoying your food, you feel so much more satisfied. And I really think that it's not just our bodies know what our bodies need. Our bodies know like what is good for our mental health too. And I think that the more we focus on like, okay, how do I feel when I'm eating? Not just how do I feel in my body, but do I feel like I'm enjoying my food? Do I feel connected with the people I'm eating with? Or do I feel shame? Do I feel sad? Do I like what is the connection that with what I'm eating, which can really affect our mental health as well.
And maybe it's another thought coming because of the course I said I am watching about the habits, because I love it. It's absolutely amazing. And what he was saying today is that like the challenge is that when we try to change our habits, the way we phrase it is like, I need to stop overeating, or I need to stop eating chocolate. And we just try to stop the habits. But that he was explaining, our mind doesn't work that way, and we instead of stopping it, we need to kind of replace it with something else. And it feels like when I was 20, I would like just concentrate on stopping and not thinking about the kind of long-term sustainable solution. So I find it interesting also to look at it from the habit perspective. That I believe, and correct me because you are the expert here, but like the eating, it's hugely connected to the habits. Like I was always having the habit of eating while watching shows, which is a big problem. If you watch, I don't know, 2 episodes 45 minutes each, and you have 1.5 hours to eat.
I think that I feel like there's two kinds of habits. I feel like there's like distraction kind of habits, and then there's environment kind of habits. And what I mean by that is like, I feel like there's some people that are like, oh, whenever I like enter my living room, I have a snack with me. It's just what I do. I have a snack with me when I'm lounging on the couch. It's what I do in that environment. And then there's those like distraction kind of habits, like you were saying, like whenever I watch TV, I have a snack. That's my habit. That's what I do. And I know for me and a lot of my clients, if you think about it, like that's still kind of like comfort eating. It's a very low level area of emotional eating because it's comfortable. It's nice. It's soothing. It makes you feel good to just have your snack while you watch TV.
Yeah.
If you didn't have a snack while you watch TV, I bet you would feel like something's missing. I'm kind of jittery. I'm a little bit antsy. I need something. And you're actually soothing that anxiety with your food because it feels good. It feels nice. It feels comfortable. So the way to actually break those habits, kind of like you were saying, is find something else to soothe you. Find something else to be comforting. Find something else to make you feel good and relaxed. So you're not just saying, I can't have my snack, because you're going to be antsy and jittery and it's going to be really hard. And all you're going to be able to do is think about that snack. You're thinking, well, I watch TV. I'm going to do something else that's soothing. something else to calm me down. And so you were replacing that habit with something else in your life.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, we as a human being, we can't live without habits, right? Because most of the time we are on autopilot and like we function because of the habits. So then the question is not about what to stop, but kind of be graceful and smart about what habits we develop, because we have to have habits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we run on habits for sure. So it's you're completely right. It really is just about replacing them with something else that feels good.
Yeah, that was exactly what was happening to me with the coffee, because I was used like I sit on our veranda, I watch the garden, and then I read, I put like the cinnamon and the sugar on the cappuccino. And then when I
Oh,
stopped drinking it, I was like, this feels so weird. Like, where is my,
yeah,
like, like
yeah.
exactly as you described. And it's really hard, like to overcome it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all know, like we hear about habits, how they take, I think it's an average of 28 days to build a new habit. So it definitely takes time and there's a level of discomfort in growth. But that's how we make self-improvements
Yeah.
is getting out of our comfort zones and expanding ourselves. And yeah, it's a great transformation.
Yeah, I mean, are you a mind reader? Because I was about to say we have to get out of our comfort zones to grow.
Yeah.
And make like we are going towards the end of the chat, and I'm sure it seems like we could go for hours, but I
Yeah.
have a couple of questions I ask most of my guests, because I want the Screw Being Unhappy podcast to be inspiration, and I believe in action, because we won't learn anything by listening to a podcast, even if we would like it, or by reading a book or watching a video. So I have this kind of question to inspire the people and put them to the action. So the first
Beautiful.
one is, what lifts you up when you are down?
Oh my goodness. I think my surroundings, like people around me, and that includes my dog. I'm very much about community. And I feel like when you're down, you can be so in your own head. So being around outside objective people to bring you up can be so amazing. And I've also learned that that's not always available, and I've got to bring myself up. And the biggest thing that's worked for me is getting in touch with my child. And I know that sounds a little bit like crazy and hippie, but when I soothe little Meg inside of me, it makes me feel so beautiful and relaxed and like I'm okay. I took care of
Yeah.
little Meg.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't, or maybe I'm hippie as well. I don't know. I use the inner child, like also with my clients. Like I'm not the coach using it all the time, but I use it. And
Yeah.
actually, in the moments you said you use your inner child, I like using my elder wiser self as
Yeah.
well. So that's also kind of nice to see the things from the bigger perspective. But I definitely believe in the like the power of like communicating with the small Meg or small Susanna,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like taking care of her.
Yeah.
And Meg, who inspires you and why?
Oh, wow. I think my best friend, her name is Megan. Um, we actually went on this journey kind of together. Not like, we didn't go through the same program, but we met each other when we were both not well, and we both healed on our own journeys at the same time. And I've watched her become the most beautiful, self-assured mom, wife, badass business owner. And I've also watched her struggle, and I've watched her never let anything stop her, anything at all. And she's conquered so much, and she does not stop. She's incredible.
So hopefully she's listening to hear all this. And
Hopefully.
yeah, that's amazing, like to have such friends who
Yeah.
inspires us, and especially like sharing the journey. My best friend, we met each other, I think we were what, 12, and it's also like amazing to see our journeys and yeah, how the life turns out. So thank you for sharing that. And now
that's
going to the action question, which I always also point out in the show notes because I really want people to go and do something after listening the podcast. So if there is one thing you would want the guys who are listening to the show, if there is one thing you would want them to do after listening to this episode, what would that be?
I would want them to ask themselves, what do I really want? Where do I really want my life to be? And that's not just my relationship with food, because that's one piece of it, but what are other aspects? And, you know, what I mean by that is when I was struggling, I didn't really hang out with my friends. I told you my travel stories. I missed out on experiences, even though I went on those trips, all those other things. And when I thought about what do I want, I was like, I want to eat normally. I want to have fun on my trips. I want to be present with my partner. I want to be good at my job. I want all of these things. And I felt like the way that I was eating and felt about myself was standing in the way. And I feel like the best thing you can do where you are right now is just build that dream and ask yourself, where do I really want to be? Because you can totally get there. You can absolutely have it. You got to see it first.
Yeah, that's amazing. I completely resonate with that, and I think sometimes it takes longer time to realize like what is our why. But what I like about what you just said, that to think where we want to be, because often people and also some of my clients, they struggle with the why, the bigger why, because it feels like, oh, I'm 35, I'm 40, and I don't know what should I do with my life. And I think like when we see the successful people, maybe they discover their passion when they're 50 or 60. So we are all super young and we still have lots of time, but kind of thinking like where I want to be, like what I want to like be doing now without having these big goals. Like it's super important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not always about goals and planning and what's going to happen. It's just what makes you happy. What do you want?
Yeah. And Meg, so can you tell us also a bit more? I saw your website, which is beautiful, by the way, and I know that you have some programs. So if people who are listening and they feel like they are not that comfortable with the food as they would want to be, like where they can find you, what you have to offer, what you have to share, what you want to share.
Absolutely. So they can find me on social media. My Instagram is meg.hanks, or my Facebook is Meg Hankenhoff, which I know is a little bit of a mouthful. And really, I do have a 2 month program, and it's broken down into 8 modules. So I mentioned the principles of intuitive eating, and all of those are covered in the modules. So it really takes everyone through the whole process of what intuitive eating is and how to adopt all of those principles and all of those ways of relating to yourself and your body and your food, so that, you know, kind of like we were saying, like we just eat normally now. Like it's just so effortless. Don't even think about it. So you can go from having this you know, up and down relationship with food to it is just effortless. And that's what I do in my 8-week program. And I also do offer one-on-one coaching for people who feel like they just have those little individual goals that they need a little bit of help with.
Yeah, thank you. And I will share all the links in the show notes. So thank you so much for being here. It was my pleasure meeting you, chatting, learning lots of new things. Lots of them resonated with me. So hopefully they also resonated with the people who were listening. And hopefully it was helpful for everybody. And yeah, I just want to say to the guys who are listening, if you can, like do the one thing, go to the action, because without it, nothing will change. So thank you, Max, so much. And hopefully we chat again some other time.
Thank you so much. This was incredible. I loved chatting with you. You're so amazing in your spirit. I learned a lot too. This was so fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.